This is combating loneliness during the holidays. And I'll just point out this helps any time of the year. We were just talking about that before you all joined us. Um, and we will have, oh, there we go. More about this in a few minutes. We are Age-Wise Colorado. We're here to navigate the aging journey with you. We hope you use us often. And if there's ever a time you can't find something, you can always call us and we will get back to you with the help you need. We do ask, I think everyone's muted themselves and turned off their cameras. Thank you for that because we record this and putting it up on the website helps when we don't have other background sounds. Um, Please put any questions you have during the presentation in the chat when the presentation is over. We will open it up to questions and answers and hopefully answer all of your questions. Age-Wise Colorado, as you know, is a nonprofit. Colorado Gives Day has opened its doors now through December 9th. And if you're willing, there is no donation too small. It really does help us keep things moving along. Or if you're interested, we have lots of volunteer opportunities on our website. There's another person. I'm so thrilled you're all joining us. Um, with that, hold on one second. We're going to have Cody Speece doing most of the presentation, and Shauna Cranmer will be joining us a little bit later as well. You can read these bios. I don't like reading to our group, so you can read these on the recording. Again, visit us anytime, give us a call. We're here to help you. And with that, I will stop and turn it over to Cody.
My name is Cody Speece, and I'm here with Acts of Connection, and Olivia Egan is also with me here just to kind of help with some of the supporting pieces for the presentation or webinar here. Um, I so it'll be my first time leading a webinar, so we'll see how this goes. But thank you all for joining. So again, we're here with Acts of Connection, talking about combating loneliness during the holidays. Um, Ultimately, Acts of Connection is a campaign through Thriving Weld, which is kind of a larger group of organizations here across Weld County that are just all kind of coming together to address this concern of loneliness and social isolation that we're experiencing here in the United States. And I just thought I would maybe start with a little bit of I guess in the chat, you can see all your names, but if anyone feels comfortable, just putting in the chat maybe what they're hoping to get out of today's presentation or something new that they want to learn. I'll give you guys a moment to kind of do that as I continue to kind of talk on. Um, but along with this, as Barbara kind of already had stated, if you guys have any questions throughout, please just go ahead and put them in the chat. If I can answer them throughout, I'll definitely try to. And if not, there is a little bit of a brief kind of Q&A at the end that we can, I can answer any questions that have come up, or you can type those questions in the chat in that last little piece. But with that, don't see anything that's come in yet, so I'll go ahead and I'll just move on to kind of the bulk of the presentation. So, yay, okay, cool. So for today, we kind of have four primary goals that we will go over. So first, we want to just kind of discover and share about different types of loneliness with everyone. As we'll see, we'll go over what social isolation and loneliness is, and then dive a little bit more into the specific types of loneliness. And the next is to identify the importance of social connection. Then I will discuss how we can be more intentional in just creating connections, especially during this holiday season. And then just consider various strategies for fostering connection. And as Barbara may have already also mentioned, though this is combating loneliness during the holiday season, a lot of what we'll be talking about is really intended to be shown and hopefully used throughout the year or in any type of situations that we may be kind of facing there. Um, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'll look at the chat and just see if we got any. Okay, so great. Well, it's nice to see that we have some people here that are looking to have an opportunity to serve kind of others with what they learned today. And a lot of with our workshops and now with this webinar is really to make champions out of who we are talking to and giving these presentations to. So hopefully they can, provide resources and tools to those that they're working with, and just kind of be a sense of connection for others. So again, appreciate you all being here, and we'll go into the next piece. So why does something like Acts of Connection, this program, exist in the first place? So in 2023, the former U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, released a report describing really this epidemic of loneliness and isolation that was occurring across the United States. Really seeing what was this kind of steady decline in the amount of time people are spending with others, and this increase in people stating that they are experiencing loneliness and isolation, and particularly to levels that are actually harmful to our mental and physical health that we'll get into a little bit more as we go on. And a good kind of starting point is that about 3 in 5, or 61% of US adults reported feeling lonely before the COVID-19 pandemic had started. And interestingly enough, as I had kind of already alluded to, since about the 1970s, we've seen that people have kind of consistently been spending less and less time with other people throughout the day on average. So in the 70s, people spent about an hour or so with those who either were not coworkers or not, housemates or family members. And now in 2025, it's down to less than about 15 minutes. So we're seeing this kind of big decrease in the amount of time we're spending with others. And now our rates of loneliness have kind of slowly increased, spiked during the pandemic. And a big piece of why this campaign is still here is because even though the COVID-19 pandemic has kind of surpassed, these rates of loneliness have not adjusted. They're still really high and they're still climbing, even with everything kind of opened back up. And alongside this, we have this notion that about less than 20% or a fifth of people who are lonely or isolated actually recognize it as a major problem. So as we'll go into, loneliness, especially consistent loneliness, can have very negative kind of health impacts, both mentally and physically. And what we want to do is kind of be a light and share that experiencing loneliness can have negative health impacts for society as a whole and individually. And when it comes to these health impacts, we see that both loneliness and social isolation actually increase our risk of dementia, stroke, and heart disease, all by kind of different factors. And it also increases our risks of anxiety, depression, and suicidality. So we see that there's this really strong association between our experiences of loneliness and various concerns of physical and mental health. And a lot of the time, what we could say is that anything that stress, like high stress, may negatively impact on our health. Loneliness is very strongly associated with high levels of stress. So they have very similar negative health impacts on our bodies and our minds. Now, we'll be talking about loneliness and social isolation. And what is an important kind of first step is that there is actually a pretty big difference between the two of them. And we'll kind of just release definitions and give ultimately what the U.S. Surgeon General's definition of each one is. So, social isolation is going to be more of our objective separation from other people. It's really this kind of lack of adequate connections to either our family or friends or community. And really, it can be caused by various physical or mobility issues. And it can also be caused by more internal issues such as social anxiety or simply just being overwhelmed with the amount of things going on in life. And a lot of the time, this can just separate us physically from other people. On the other end, loneliness is more of a subjective feeling of disconnection. It's more of this feeling of being alone, misunderstood, or not cared about with others. So, with loneliness, a lot of the time, you might see that someone is very involved in the community, very active, seems to have a lot of friends, for example, but they could still very much be experiencing loneliness if those connections that they do have are not truly fulfilling. Um, and with loneliness, again, it is this more of a subjective feeling. We say that if someone's lonely if they say that they're lonely. Um, and that kind of is where we see the separation between how we would address something like loneliness versus how we might address something like social isolation. And loneliness being more the subjective feeling actually has three kind of categories or types that we'll go over. That will be on this slide. Um, so our first type of loneliness is what we would consider our emotional loneliness. So this is more of our absence of our more intimate or tight-knit relationships. These are going to be more of our connections to our families, partners, or really close friends. This type of loneliness is often associated with the term our core five. A lot of the time, there's this notion that we typically have or aim for about five really close, tight-knit relationships, and these are usually people who we might live with and a few close friends. And the reason that it's its own type of loneliness is that a lot of the time these people provide us with this type of emotional support, whether that's positive or during times of negative need. Um, and so having this type of loneliness and having a sense of absence from close relationships can have very kind of negative health impacts on our emotional well-being. Our next type of loneliness is this more social, and it's more of an absence of a social network or social connection. And it's usually related more to our sense of belonging or interactions with our community. And it doesn't mean just our entire neighborhood or town, but this could just be our ability to interact and have whether it's time or a sense of belonging with different groups that might be involving our workplaces, or say we're in um, a living facility to have that, more connection with our neighbors and connections there, or friend groups that might be more of a broad sense of friends. And then the last type of loneliness is more of this internal. So this really stems from feelings of a lack of control of our own life or well-being, and also is tied to having kind of lower self-esteem or lacking coping strategies when it comes to experiencing loneliness or high anxiety. And usually what we say is this is more of our ability to connect with ourself, and ability to kind of recognize how we are feeling. And this is often the internal loneliness is usually where we see the typical definition of loneliness, that more subjective feeling of we might be around a lot of people and still feel this sense of um, separation or disconnect or lack of belonging with others. And sometimes that really can stem from a more internal, or Olivia always explains it really well, but this existential type of loneliness where sometimes we just recognize that the world is a very big place. And sometimes we can feel really isolated in that. Now, so when it comes to kind of trying to recognize loneliness or isolation, sometimes the big first step is just to see where we might be at along this kind of scale there. So, what we have is a 6 question connection quiz. It's actually from a UCLA evidence-based loneliness scale. And usually during our workshops, we'll have our participants take it, and it's just something it's for their own sake and something that they can kind of reflect on. I'll leave this up for a minute. I don't know if Olivia, if you can put the uh, link in the chat for it as well. It looks like you. did. Yeah. And don't feel inclined to take this. It's very much just a personal thing, but we wanted to have it as a resource for you because even in past workshops, we've had people really want to be able to offer it to other people in their life. So, um, and really what the connection workshop or a connection quiz is it gives you a little bit of a kind of like the score just to measure how you, maybe not how lonely you are, but how connected you feel with others. And what's really important to note is that number value you get is for how you feel at that exact moment. And it's really important that, and we'll discuss later on, but it's important to recognize that loneliness is kind of this continuum, and what score you might have today at this exact moment might be very different than, let's say, you take it next week during Thanksgiving, where, you might be more with family, or vice versa, where we might have a very different experience in the holidays. So it's just important to recognize that the point of the quiz is to be able to kind of take it in different times and see and reflect on how we might be feeling in different times of our lives. So I encourage you to take it in your own time. And if we have questions on it, or if you end up taking it during this, we don't want you to like share any results or anything, but any questions about it, feel free to ask. Okay, so now kind of on the flip side of loneliness is we have this notion of social connection. Um, and really social connection is maybe not the opposite of loneliness, but it's this idea of having these more connected ties with our community, with loved ones, with family. And we see that social connection has a lot of positives and really combats these negative experiences that we might experience, particularly with loneliness. And when we look at social connection, there's actually a lot of positives and important pieces of it. Um, One that I tend to highlight a lot is this idea that uh, when it comes to social connection, humans are actually pretty much biologically wired for social connection. We see it as being equally as important as those attributes of shelter, food, and water. And we see this in our relation to how social connection actually improves our immunity and life expectancy and emotional regulation. When we're around other people and really either connected to them or ourselves, we are truly more able to kind of share maybe not our burdens, but our concerns and issues, and be able to kind of have more of a trusting relationship with them. And just biologically, we have a stronger immune system when we're around other people because we're exposed to more, I guess, just more pathogens on a more biological scale. But I won't go too much more into it, but just the slides really just to emphasize that there are a lot of positives that come with having social connection with others and really trying to recognize when we might be experiencing loneliness. So we might be seeing that we see that there's such an important piece to social connection, and maybe a lot of people already know this. But what we see is that even with all these positives, a lot of people are still experiencing loneliness. And a lot of this is because making connections with others is really challenging. Um, it is sometimes difficult, and all when we think, especially during, let's say, the holidays, we're going into the winter. Not only is it cold, not only are there a lot of things going on, not only are we potentially expected to be with family or friends and might not have those opportunities to actually do that. We at X Connection just want to recognize that sometimes making those connections with others, whether it's connecting with their family, whether it's connecting with strangers in the community, it's a challenge. Um, and I know it's a webinar, so hopefully it's okay. But if anyone would be willing to maybe share just some potential broad reasons that we think it might be challenging for someone to connect. And uh, I'll try to read through them, but I'll just give a second to see if any come in. But yeah, just if anyone wants to share, not specifically for themselves, but just what they might see in other people that might make it challenging to connect with others. So I can give that just a moment for you all to think about. So Barbara had mentioned that today's political climate really fosters this kind of very political divide, and it makes it hard to connect with other people. That's definitely one that I see a lot. Um, we had another one that talked about just being introverted and having more physical health ailments that kind of separate us from others. And it's very true. Things like anxiety to talk with others is very much a reason that might just make it more challenging to really want to take that step to kind of connect with others. But it's also really important that we recognize that physical separation that might make it challenging. For example, I used to grow up in a very small rural town, in the mountains, and when the winter rolled around and it would snow, we often really would be kind of stuck on our own. And it was really challenging. We either wasn't safe to drive or we didn't feel comfortable doing so. And maybe the power goes out, and it's just this kind of bit of separation that we might experience, even if temporary. We also see that, and we'll also go into this, is that there's this kind of life transition that happens maybe once we retire from work. And with that comes a lot of just changes overall. We go from maybe seeing people every day, having this kind of community at work, or even just having more of a connection with ourselves as we're maybe, accomplishing little goals at work and doing these things. And now we retire and we have this bit of a separation where we're just naturally kind of disconnected from our community, in terms of our work. And sometimes going to work is easier to lead to going to something after work, that might be more of a social activity. So that also adds a really big challenge to it. And I'll talk about that neighbor piece as well. I hear this a lot, and even my parents have talked about it a lot, but there's this kind of separation we have from our neighbors. And later on in the webinar, we'll kind of go over some strategies for connecting with others. And it's hard, but to have the opportunity to try to connect with our neighbors is actually huge, but it's also a challenge. Sometimes we simply don't want to talk to them. Sometimes they might not be as inviting, and that can lead to a lot of just different challenges there. But thank you all. I really appreciate you contributing. And we have a little list that I'll provide that just has some kind of more broad ideas that we might have already really discussed. But the first one is just that time. A lot of us might just be either busy, or it might not even be us. Say that we might be retired, and say it's the holidays. A lot of people might be working extra hours to try to take that time off for work, for the day of the holidays or day of Thanksgiving. And sometimes by simply contributing more time to those, to our work schedules, or to doing all these other like miscellaneous activities to prepare for the holidays, it makes it hard to have the time to actually spend with others, or it makes it more challenging to, even if we do try to reach out, sometimes it's harder to find the time to connect with others during this period. Another one, as we had kind of mentioned, some people might be what we'd say are introverts, and they might not have that great excitement of going and interacting with other people. Um, but we have this, it's a lot of the time just simple anxiety and nerves, or the next one, just being overwhelmed can have a lot of, it just adds, it can add a lot of challenge to really even wanting to take that first step in connecting with others. Um, the last one I also kind of mentioned when we might look at the holidays, but there's sometimes these priorities. Um, we'll have shifts in schedules, so people might be prioritizing work, especially nowadays. There's a lot of talk of how much more time people might be spending while they're working, or people might be trying to focus on their families during this time. as opposed to taking that kind of step to hang out with their friends. And a lot of the time that can add a challenge to making sure that we have a more well-rounded opportunity to connect with various people. But yeah, thank you all for sharing. I'll continue on from here. So one thing is that connection can actually be really tough to measure. Um, Funnily enough, earlier we gave you a little connection quiz where, in a way, you kind of measured your loneliness or isolation or connection at this current moment. But being able to really see what connection is and how you're truly feeling isn't super very obvious either to yourself, and it's definitely not easy to see when we're looking at other people in our lives, whether it's our friends or people we're working with or our clients. It can be a bit of a challenge to really see how connected they be, or maybe um, how much loneliness might be impacting them. And a big piece is that a person's level of social connection is really not just determined by those number of relationships they have. So as we kind of talked about, say you see someone that's very involved, or say it's the holidays, they have a really, they have a big family. So there's this expectation that maybe they are fine, they're doing okay. But there's more to it than simply just these number of relationships that someone might have. A lot of the time, the amount of opportunity to actually foster those connections and be with people, that's a big part of how we might look to measuring connection is how often we get to spend with people. Um, and yeah, um, and sorry, I was reading the chat, so I got a little distracted, but thank you for contributing. And another piece when it comes to more than just numbers of relationships is this idea of having quality or healthy relationships. We might, say someone goes to school all day, they might not have these strong connections with others, even though they're constantly surrounded by other people. You might even be part of a club and you might have these similarities of people, but sometimes if you're not forming these more opportunities for healthy relationships with others, that can also have negative health impacts on our quality of relationships. Yeah. Um, Usually what we say is just like loneliness, social connection really can change constantly. And we say it's on this kind of continuum. Just like we talked about with that quiz, how you feel or how anyone might feel today might be very different. We can talk about different situations where, especially like why we're discussing this now while we enter into the holidays. The holidays is a time where a lot of people, unfortunately, don't have a higher level of experiencing connection. And there's a lot of different factors that play into that. Barbara had just mentioned loss and grief as being something that can really be an impairment. And especially as we go into the holidays, sometimes it might be our first Christmas or Thanksgiving where we're spending maybe not alone, but without someone that we have been having the opportunity to last long time or last few years to share it with, and now we're not being able to share it with them. Um, and it might lead into this time where we might just feel a bit more disconnected from others, even if we might have other connections. Um, and kind of just understanding that we enter into this slump and that can very much happen. And the fortunate thing is that social connection and this continuum can go both ways. We can enter into this potential time of struggle and disconnect during the holidays or winter, and it doesn't have to be during the holidays. Sometimes it's just we move or we retire, and there's a lot of different things that can really kind of set us into a moment of separation and isolation from others. And a big piece of it is just recognizing that um, this idea of recognizing that things can be temporary, and just kind of, keeping this kind of forward focus. I guess the slide changed. I didn't mean to do that. But um, I'll go back to that. And then I'll go ahead and just kind of move to the last piece. But really what we want to focus on as well is this idea that when loneliness doesn't continually adjust and we feel this kind of sense of chronic loneliness, this is really where we see those unfortunate negative health impacts being more prevalent. It's understandable that we might experience a sense of loneliness for some time or a sense of disconnect for some time, whether it's the holidays or whether it's just coming home from work and say you live alone. Um, but it's when we kind of have this consistent sense of loneliness where just like stress, when we're constantly stressed, we see those negative health impacts. And it's the same with loneliness. And what we want to foster here is being able to recognize when someone else might be experiencing loneliness. Because a lot of the time, the best thing we can do is just ask them how they're doing. A big piece of the Axe Connection campaign or health initiative is just raising awareness about doing these small little things of almost obvious seeming things of, asking people these questions, checking on your friends. Um, and we'll go into these more specific strategies for the last bit of the presentation, but um, taking that step to recognize when someone might be experiencing more chronic loneliness can really have a positive impact on them. And those small questions can make a huge difference. Yeah, and as Olivia also just added, it's this idea of being intentional with our connections. Really just taking a step to be in the moment when we're with other people. Um, yeah. Okay, we'll go into. So what we want to do now is hopefully just provide some examples of different ways or examples or strategies of ways that maybe we can go and connect with others or ourselves. And they're just going to be kind of broader categories. And what we want you all to kind of take with you is the point of providing a few of them is so we can see which ones maybe click the best with us. Um, some of them you might look at. So, for example, we'll get to it, but one of them is getting to know your neighbors. You might not really care to get to know your neighbors, but you might be more interested in joining something. So we really just encourage you all to kind of take with you what strategies you feel maybe just the most comfortable participating in, or feel like maybe seem the most realistic, especially as we go into the winter season. So I'll go ahead. There will be about three per slide. So this first one, these first strategies are actually what I would say are going to be the most connected to that intimate or emotional type of loneliness or connection that we talked about earlier when we said those types of loneliness. So really what these three are addressing is are ways to connect with people that we may already have relationships with. And this first one on the far left is just to invest in our relationships. And what this really means is to keep a relationship and a friendship going takes effort and it takes time. And it takes remembering that we have these connections with others. Sometimes it's easy when we have a friend or we move into transition or we go into the holiday season that we might neglect certain relationships. And it's really just taking that time to reach out to someone or schedule a little dinner with them. Um, we're here because we recognize that the holiday season can be tough. And a lot of it is important. What's important is that we can recognize that it's going to be tough for other people as well. Um, and simply just reaching out and asking a friend of ours during this time if they want to go get hot chocolate together or just sit in and watch a movie can really have a positive impact on not only your potential mental health, but theirs as well. And just give an opportunity to really kind of strengthen these existing relationships that we have. And this one really segues into being responsive, supportive, and grateful. And this is more about how we just interact with the people around us, um, having more active conversation with them. I always think a really good thing to do is just give someone that you're close to a compliment or just show them that you care about them and feel supported by them is a really good way to just show that you're understanding. And of course, with Thanksgiving, it's a great time to it's a good excuse, I like to say, to just show that you care about someone and you feel supported and thankful for them. And really, what the strategy just encourages is taking the step to do those things and making it known. Sometimes we might have a lot of really strong love for someone and appreciation, but sometimes just addressing that to them can be a great way, again, to kind of strengthen this bond that you might have. And then the last one on here is to get involved in the community. And it's kind of a segue into the next slide, but it's also sometimes getting involved in the community, whether it's going to a dance class or going to um, like a winter market, or a lot of the winter sessions will have like crafts markets. Inviting a friend to go to something like this can just be a really good opportunity to get out and maybe do something together that's different. And it might be an opportunity to get in the holiday season. But this also segues into just an opportunity to meet other people and also just feel connected, potentially more with our community as a whole. Um, a lot of the time when it comes to the winter, either city locales or libraries will put on specific events that are themed, and sometimes just taking an opportunity to go to those can really just put us in not only maybe a more festive mood, but just give us an opportunity to be with other people. Um, and yeah, and we'll kind of segue into the next one. So these three are going to be more of our social addressing social loneliness and social connection aspects and how we can kind of make sure we're interacting with our community and hopefully get a more stronger sense of belonging with them. So getting to know your neighbors is a really big one. It's important to recognize that not everyone is going to be in a situation where, one, they have neighbors. Some people live in rural environments and that might not be a potential. But if we're in a situation where maybe we have neighbors that are really close, um, or a big thing that I always think of is just having neighbors that you see frequently, but maybe don't interact with, or say you get home at the same time, or you always go and take your dog out at the same time. Um, just having a moment to kind of maybe spark up a little discussion with them, can really just create a bit of a sense of community for where you particularly live. Um, and sometimes say you live in an apartment complex or a neighborhood that has a bit more of a, uh, holiday decorating. Sometimes just being a part of that in with your community can have a really big impact. And the next one is just to extend kindness and respect, and kind of the same as with the last slide on gratitude. This is more about how we interact with people, in that sense of communication. When we have the opportunity to just be kind in a situation with someone that maybe we don't know super well, that can really make a bit of a big difference for us, especially during the holidays, whether that might be just giving a compliment or sparking up a discussion with someone new if you do go to a craft market or you go to get a coffee somewhere. Um, and this idea of just having a kind and respectful conversation with someone new can really lead to kind of more of a small but meaningful interaction with someone. And that's kind of the big key with that. And then the last one is just we're looking for ways to serve others. Particularly during the holidays, we focus a lot on ideas of food drives and volunteer work, whether that's maybe helping someone decorate their home if it's a neighbor, or being a part of something where we're, um, donating cans. Doing these small little things can just be a great opportunity for us to maybe serve ourselves as well. We say, do something for yourself, but it's also a great opportunity to have an excuse to just serve others and get a sense of true fulfillment out of that. And we like to say just to find a cause that inspires you, and really kind of take the potential step, if possible, to try to get involved there. And it might be more of a community thing if you live in a living home or a resident home. But it also might be having an opportunity to go to a club or an organization. Yeah. And then our last three strategies are going to be more focused on our that internal loneliness or internal sense of connection, that connection with ourselves. And a big one that we talk about is this idea of just cutting back on things that may make you feel disconnected. Um, a lot of the time, we might get into a bit of a funk, especially during the winter. I don't know about you guys, but it gets dark at like 5 o'clock and it's kind of rough. Um, and sometimes we might see that, oh, well, it's dark out, or, it's the end of the day. I'm just gonna take it easy and, spend time. Um, but sometimes if it's important that we're able to maybe recognize if taking the step away from things that we would typically do, say at the end of the day or early in the morning or after work, um, if we're not doing those things anymore, it's important that maybe we just take a step to recognize how we're feeling when we're not doing those things. And if there's an opportunity that we have to re-get involved, just recognizing that, oh, just because it's the winter, maybe we don't have to take a step back from these things, or maybe I can find something new during this time. Um, always just keep yourself, I don't like to say busy, but just keep yourself doing things that you enjoy and that you love. And the next one is just developing coping strategies. We didn't do it here because it's a webinar, but a lot of the time during these kind of workshops that we'll put on, we'll uh, practice like a breathing exercise. And this is more just to have something small that takes 2 or 3 minutes of just taking a moment to kind of recenter yourself. Um, and have something where maybe if you're stressed about going out, or maybe you're just anxious overall, and maybe that again, that more internal or existential um, loneliness or anxieties, having something that we can do as a coping strategy is important. So this could be something like journaling or reading a book. Um, One that I really think of is my grandma and I used to sew a lot. She taught me pretty much everything I know about sewing that I haven't done in years, and now I already forgot most of it, unfortunately. But having, I know that for her, it was something that was meditative and gave her something that just she could just really spend time on her own doing, and bring herself and center back. And it's something that I would like to get into as well eventually. But just having something that gives you an opportunity to relax and take a step back is big. And I put this nice gentleman with the dog because a lot of the time pets or even a friend's pet can really be a huge thing in just giving us a positive form of a coping strategy. Um, but yeah, we had someone just put in the chat that headphones and relaxing music, that's a very big one, especially for myself. And sometimes coping strategies could be one of the ones for me is also just is like hanging up Christmas ornaments. That's something that for me always one sets me into the mood of the holidays, but it gives me a sense of almost nostalgia and a sense of time where maybe if I'm stressed about work, I can always take a little bit of a break to just kind of do something different and get ready for the holidays. And then just the last one is embracing time spent alone. It's really important to recognize that sometimes we really aren't going to have as many opportunities to connect with people, especially with the holidays and winter and cold and busy schedules and busy people, that we might be spending more time alone and the opportunities to connect might not always be there. Or maybe we are super busy and we do get a moment to spend alone. We have this kind of duality there where in both situations, we want to make sure that when we are alone, that we're using it as a time to do something that we enjoy or to do something that maybe is nothing and we're just kind of recharging, as we like to say. Especially for, let's say, our introverts, when we do go out and we talk to other people or we're very active, it can be very draining. Even a small conversation with someone at the grocery store or going to a club or being involved in like a group, can be very draining. So when we go home, it's important that we really just take the time to do things that we enjoy doing alone. Or going out and doing things alone, like this gentleman being in a diner by himself and just kind of doing his thing, can be very crucial because that recharge will make us more, or can really help us be more prepared for uh, connection opportunities in the future. So those are our just kind of base wider strategies that we hope that you could kind of take with you. And there's a lot of different pieces to each one. And hopefully maybe one or two stuck with you that you would feel just more comfortable giving a first shot. And moving to our last little pieces of the webinar, but we just wanted to provide a few kind of tangible ideas or resources that maybe you all could look for. I know the age-wise is a bit more widespread, so some of this is quite broad. But a really good resource that you could provide either yourself or a family member or a client is just to direct them to, let's say, a local library or a city event page, especially during the winter, as I had mentioned. There's going to be a lot of activities and library events are almost always free. It's really a good opportunity to just see something good to do, and they're often very festive. Um, and then we just encourage to look to various local counseling or mental health services. Um, we want to recognize that sometimes loneliness can, especially chronic loneliness, can be very detrimental to our mental health. And to recognize that sometimes those nine strategies or doing all these things isn't going to be enough. And just recognizing that that is a potential and, having some type of local counseling service or mental health care just in the back of your heads can be important for us. Then we also just want to kind of advertise out the area agency on aging that just provides a lot of different resources, particularly for our aging adults. And then kind of connected to a lot of what we would see with our city event pages, active adult centers and recreation centers are just great ways to find clubs or organizations to not only be physically active, but sometimes it's a great way to learn how to do crocheting or a great way to find a class on technology or how to interact with other people or there's just a lot of different strategies and ideas that we can find just by searching up active adult centers and our rec centers for our local areas. Um, and then another big one is service clubs. So this might be something like Kiwanis or Rotary. Actually, just watched a really neat documentary that just highlighted how important that these service clubs can be to giving us a sense of belonging. And we may have never thought about being a part of one, but they are still there. So just looking into those types of service clubs where we can give back to our community and find community is a great resource. And then our last two is just finding either a journal on your own or a book that might be more of a therapeutic one. A lot of the kind of activities or thought process what we like to kind of frame Max Connection with is this book called The Loneliness Problem. And it's a great kind of activity book that just provides little activities throughout and kind of focuses on different aspects of connection and loneliness and positive self-talk and reinforcement. And you can get it online or Barnes and Noble. I think it's like $9 or so, but we just wanted to kind of advertise that book here. And then the last piece is just potential online resources. Living Room Conversations is an online platform where it just provides potential ways to connect with people and conversation starters. Sometimes you have to pay for things on there, but I did just want to advertise it out. Far From Alone is another resource that's typically filled with stories of experiences from other people, particularly other aging adults. And it's just a great way to see other ways to what other people might be experiencing. Um, and Yeah, and the last one's just a volunteer match, or I think it's called Idealist now. And that's a great way if you want to get more involved in the community, just to find potential ways to volunteer, whether it's with, a food bank or whether it's with the recreation department. They have a lot of different sources there. So hopefully one of these might stick with you, but we wanted to be able to, you guys to walk away with something kind of tangible there. And then we have our kind of join the movement slide. So we do have a website, and we just encourage you all to visit it. It's called activeConnectionWeld.org. And it has a lot of just different resources. We have these things called connection guides, and a lot of the strategies that we talked about here are kind of reflected in that connection guide, but with specific resources. They are a bit more specific to Weld County, but if you're near Weld County or they also are more universal. Some of the resources there are more, statewide or universal for others. So I just encourage you all to take a moment to look at it. And then hopefully the big piece of this is just that we hope that you can walk away and try to just be intentional when we're connecting with others, intentional about connecting with others. Um, and hopefully either use these resources yourself or provide and encourage others to utilize them. And yeah, I will go ahead and I'll leave it for just a minute or so to invite any potential questions. You can ask in the chat and I'll just try to answer them out loud. Um, and yeah, and I have one more slide that I'll do after we have the questions, but go ahead
It,
and ask away.
Cody,
Yeah.
hi, it's Barbara. I just
Yes.
wanted to mention we have a whole section on our website that is about social engagement, learning opportunities, life enrichment. There is an organization where, and and some of these costs, some don't, where you can virtually travel and you are
Cool.
with a group and there is a guide and they're in all kinds of exotic places. There are educational opportunities that um, you can sign up for different classes. There's a program called Ollie out at DU that has
Mm.
phenomenal programs for older adults. And when you take these classes, I think some of them can be virtual, some in person, but it's a great way to meet new people that obviously have a similar interest because you're taking this class to learn something. So,
Exactly.
yeah, I just recommend anyone that is interested, take a look at that section. Because, we're trying to offer a broad range of whatever you need. And certainly, so I just heard at a meeting last week that our suicide rate in older adults is extraordinarily high, and it is the
Mhm.
highest group of
Yeah.
people. And so we want to do everything we can to connect.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know why I didn't put age-wise on there, but it is a great way
Put
and
it
another
on your
great
next
resource.
one.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, just any opportunity to find more resources is a great way to go. So, but thank you for sharing that. Oh, cool. I don't see any questions, so I'll go ahead and move into our last kind of end slide. But it's thought we'd end by with a little quote. So it just says that the vast majority of us are in the same boat, wanting to connect, wanting to talk about something real that lets us think and feel seen and heard. But getting to that isn't always easy or natural. And a big piece of this is just a lot of the time we might be experiencing loneliness, and a lot of people are experiencing loneliness, and a lot of that piece is just that sometimes people don't want to come off as feeling that way, or they don't want to burden others with the feelings that they might be experiencing. And we just encourage you to recognize that a lot of people are in that boat. And there's a lot of stigma associated with loneliness and isolation. And we hope that with X Connection and with people taking the step to kind of just do those little pieces where we reach out or we ask questions, can really help kind of reduce that stigma that's associated with it. So thank you all. I'll go ahead and I'll close this, and um, you're still welcome to ask any questions that you might have, or Barbara can go ahead and close this out.
Yeah, does anyone else have any other question or anything they'd like to share? We've got 2 minutes left, or you can have a 2 minute extra time in your life.
I know, get
Well,
your time back.
Cody, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. I really appreciate you taking the time to to join us. And I want to wish everyone happy holidays. Don't be alone. Connect.
Yeah. No, thank you all for coming. And Lucille, it's Weld County just because that is where the initiative has been kind of birthed from that Thriving Weld Coalition. But really the hope with Access Connection is to give opportunities to share with other counties, other territories or areas of Colorado or more wide. The intent of X Connection is to continue, hopefully, just growing and supporting programs across the state. But a lot of it is just focused on that Weld County piece, with the idea of hopefully growing.
Well, we appreciate you. I hope maybe someday you guys can expand down to Metro Denver and we can get a
We'll
group like
see.
that going down here for people.
Yeah,
Okay,
for
thank
sure.
you all. I'm going to close us out. Take care. Have a safe and happy holiday season.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you so much.